What's up, y'all? Today we have a carbon fiber rear diffuser and it has a crack in the epoxy resin. Not sure how it happened, if it was from a rock or if the owner backed up into something, but we're going to go ahead and repair it. Alright, first step. We're going to take this razor blade and just chip out any of the loose pieces that are just barely hanging on there. Now, any of these pieces that don't come off easily, we're going to have to pry up underneath the epoxy. Be careful not to cut into the actual fabric itself. And we're going to go ahead and pry and just break those pieces off. So what we're looking for is a clean break. I tried to make a score there to see if it would break at that score, but it didn't really work out. If I maybe made the score closer to where it's separated, then it would have worked maybe a little bit better. But this is as much as I chipped out. As you can see, there's no more white or hazy parts of the resin. It's all just kind of either the bare carbon fiber or just a clean break all the way around it. So what we're really looking for is the clean edges all the way around, no white haziness. We took some air and a little brush and got all the debris out of it. So this is what it looks like now. If you've never messed with resin before or used the specific brand, I would say put some down on a piece of test scrap paper. Comes with a 2-part nozzle that mixes it. Don't use that nozzle for this test because it'll dry up by the time you're done. Just go ahead and pour some out, mix it together, and wait for it to harden. And then you can see how you can work with it and how much time you have before it hardens. Alright, filling time. So fill in where you're missing the resin. Also go over the edge a little bit because we're going to be sanding it flat afterwards. What you want is the resin to cure and harden, and it needs to be higher than the rest of everything else. So if you got a little bit extra and it's still wet, you can kind of scrape it off a little bit. That'll make your sanding less time consuming. And so we got ours all filled. It's still wet. I'm going to go ahead and hit it with a torch on its lowest setting, and that's just going to bring out any air bubbles that's trapped in the resin. Just a few quick passes, and that's all we need. When you're filling this, you want to try to get it all in one go and above everything else. If you have to add some more because you're low, after it dries, then you might see a ghosting effect between the layers. So right now, it's all dried and cured, and we're going to move on to our sanding step. This is what it looks like after I block sanded it with 600 wet sandpaper. I still do need to do a little bit more sanding. It's not quite feathered yet, and as you can see, there's still some shiny parts around the edges. That just means that my resin is still high, and I can kind of still feel it when I run my finger over it. At this point, I don't see any reason to keep sanding with 500. I'm going to move on to 1000 or 1200. And I'll show you that step. I've been sanding a bit with 1000 or 1200 wet, and what you want to do is just kind of finalize your basic shape. So if you have high spots, apply pressure to those high spots versus the low spots. Really just run your hand over it to feel it. If it feels smooth, then you're probably okay. This feels pretty good, so go ahead and wipe off my water and move on to the next step, which is 3000 grit. And this is what it looks like after I dried it. And this is what it looks like after I've sanded it with the 3000 grit wet. So as you can see, there's a little white spot there. That's probably from where I didn't chip out the edge good enough, and there was a little bit of resin that was still showing white. But overall, the thing looks pretty good. So we're going to move on to the next step of polishing. If you're not sure if you sanded enough with 3000, what you can do is take some detail spray or water and spray it on the area, and while it's wet, that's what it's gonna look like pretty much once you polish it. So if it looks good wet, you're pretty much ready to polish. So here we have some Meguiar's Ultimate Cut Compound, and we have a red foam pad on an orbital, and we're about halfway as far as speed, and we're just moving it around, not trying to sit somewhere too long. If the compound starts to dry up, just spray some water, some detailing spray on there just to make sure you're lubricated, and just go back and forth. A couple quick passes and we are good to go. Alright, after the polish was cleaned up, I applied a coat of carnauba wax, and right now I'm wiping that off. And as you can see, it looks pretty good. There's a little bit of waviness in it still. I probably could have spent a little more time block sanding it and getting that shape just right, so when the light reflects off of it, you don't have a little bit of a ripple. But for the most part, it looks pretty good. The epoxy that I used is a little clearer than the epoxy that's already on there, and that could be from just sun fade. Like, sun will usually yellow epoxy. So I know this is an older piece. If I wanted it to match, I probably could have found some epoxy that wasn't quite as clear. But for the most part, I think it looks pretty good. And we notice it because we know where it's at, but if you stand away from it, most people aren't going to be able to tell where the repair was. So yeah, I think it looks pretty good. A lot better than what it was, for sure. Alrighty, thanks for watching.